Why was she always ignored at the briefing table? Maybe it was easier for them to pretend she wasn't there, easier to laugh at her silence, than to wonder what that silence might mean. The clang of steel filled the air at Fort's armory range. Rows of soldiers barked commands, bolts slammed forward, rifles cracked open for inspection. The rhythm of readiness pulsed through the hot gray morning, steady as a heartbeat. To most, it was another day. But at the far end of the clearing, crouched low by a weapons rack, was the one person no one ever seemed to notice. A contractor, just another civilian technician paid to clean rifles and calibrate scopes. Her name was Eden Wolf. Her motions were precise, clinical. She worked on the disassembled M4 in front of her as if each bolt and spring carried weight beyond its steel. She didn't fidget, didn't hurry. Every stroke of the cloth across a chamber wall was deliberate. She wore a plain olive tank top dusted with carbon and oil. Over it, a faded work jacket hung loose, one sleeve sliding down her arm as she leaned forward. Sweat marked the curve of her shoulder, and that was when it happened. The fabric slipped just far enough to reveal the ink. Black lines, bold and unmistakable. A skull, hollow-eyed, biting into the curve of a trident. An anchor beneath. The emblem of a unit most men never dared speak aloud unless they'd bled for it. SEAL Team 6. Beneath it, 3 names etched so small they could have been carved into her skin with fire. One soldier noticed first. A private barely out of training, his boot slipped off the edge of the bench when his eyes caught the shape on her arm. He blinked, frozen. His buddy followed his gaze. His mouth went dry. The cleaning rod slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. "Holy crap," he whispered. "Do you see that?" Another turned, then another. Laughter died. Voices dimmed. Because you don't just wear that kind of tattoo. Not here. Not in public. Not unless you've earned it the hardest way possible. And certainly not if you're a woman. The silence spread like wildfire. Men who moments earlier had been joking, cursing, oiling their weapons, now stared at her with the uneasy stillness of soldiers who had stumbled onto something forbidden. Eden didn't notice, or maybe she did and chose not to. Her hands kept moving, steady, unwavering. She pressed the bolt carrier into place, adjusted the alignment, checked the scope mount. The world could hold its breath all it wanted. She would not. But from the corner of the catwalk above, a sound broke the tension. Boots, polished boots. The kind of boots no trainee wore. General Keene stepped into view. 4 stars shone faint against the steel lighting. He was a man who had carried battlefields in his eyes for decades, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 wounds that still ached on cold nights, a bronze star with valor. He did not rattle. But now his stride faltered. He stopped mid-step, as though the sight of her tattoo had reached into his chest and pulled the air from his lungs. For a moment the general did not breathe. His aide opened his mouth to ask something, but Keene silenced him with a single sharp gesture. And down below, the most hardened NCOs had gone still. No one spoke. The woman with the tattoo hadn't drawn a weapon. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even looked up. And yet the range had shifted around her, as if gravity itself bent toward her silence. Keene descended the stairs 1 step at a time, boots hitting steel with deliberate rhythm. He walked through the range as if time itself slowed for him. Soldiers tracked him with wide eyes, whispering just loud enough to hear their own disbelief. Eden set her torque wrench carefully across the buttstock she was working on. She flexed her arm just slightly. The ink was now in full view. Keene stopped 3 paces away. He saw her face fully for the first time. And something inside him froze. Her braid was shorter than he remembered, her eyes sharper, more weary. But the posture, that controlled stance, the subtle scan of exits, the quiet readiness etched into her body, it was familiar. Too familiar. His voice caught before it left his throat. Finally, he swallowed and spoke. "Chief Wolf." The name came out like a prayer, softer than command, more reverent than authority. The air around them tightened, stretched thin like wire. Eden's head turned slowly. Her eyes met his. For an instant, recognition flickered across her face. Distant, careful, unreadable. Keen's hand rose to his forehead, fingers tight, posture sharp. A salute. Not the salute of a general to a subordinate. Not formality, not duty. Debt. Respect. Memory. The base held its breath. Eden didn't move. She didn't salute back. She simply met his eyes, calm and steady, unflinching. In that frozen second, the soldiers realized what they were seeing. The woman in a tank top with oil-stained hands wasn't just a contractor. She wasn't just some mechanic or forgotten veteran. She was a ghost. A legend. Whispers had floated through the Navy for years. Impossible stories of a female SEAL, of a name that didn't exist on any roster, of a ghost who vanished after a mission that never reached the books. And here she was, standing in the daylight, breathing the same air as them. Keen's lips barely moved as he spoke. Permission to stand in your shadow. A ripple of confusion swept across the range. Soldiers exchanged looks, stunned by what they heard from a four-star general. Eden's gaze softened only slightly. She gave the faintest nod, barely a movement, but it was enough. Keen dropped his salute. She was never meant to be seen again, he murmured, almost to himself. But hell, you brought the ghosts back with you, didn't you? The words weren't meant for the soldiers. They weren't even meant for her. They were meant for the silence, for the names that hung unseen between them. The soldiers didn't understand yet. How could they? To them, she was still just a mystery. A woman with an impossible tattoo, standing under the eyes of a general who had just broken every rule of protocol to honor her. But Eden Wolf knew, because every line of that tattoo was carved with blood. Jacob Aaron Cross. Names she carried not as proof, not as rank, but as weight. Her silence wasn't defiance, it wasn't pride. It was grief. And for the first time in years, someone had seen it. The base would talk, rumors would spread, whispers would carry across and into mess halls. But Eden Wolf didn't care. She picked up her torque wrench again, turned back to the rifle on her bench, and resumed her work. Because ghosts don't explain themselves. They just remain. Why did she never speak about where she came from? Was it shame? Or something heavier, something buried so deep that words would only dishonor it? Long before she was the ghost in a tank top, Eden Wolf was just a name scribbled in the margins of military paperwork. A recruit flagged not for misconduct, but for potential that unsettled people in quiet rooms. She was 23 when she entered Naval Special Warfare Prep. Young, unassuming, but with the kind of fire that didn't need to announce itself. Already, she outpaced most of the men in strength, marksmanship, and the brutal psychological testing that had broken candidates twice her size. They didn't know what to do with her. No woman had ever come this far. And some wanted to make sure none ever would. So they tried to break her. They dropped her into the Crucible, a 72-hour survival gauntlet designed to strip flesh from ego and grind bone to dust. No food, no light, no map. Just objectives scattered across wilderness by ice and stone. On the second night, search teams nearly pulled her out for frostbite when the temperature dropped below zero. Her lips were blue, her fingers stiff, but by morning she had already reached her third extraction point. When they finally found her, she was crouched near a makeshift tin can burner, cooking a field rat over a scrap of flame. She looked up once, nodded calmly, and said, "Wasn't the worst vacation I've had." The instructors didn't laugh. But someone in a back office started paying attention. Not officially, of course. Her file wasn't decorated with medals or commendations. It was stamped with red ink. Quiet, shadow, eyes only. From that moment, Eden Wolf stopped existing as a candidate. she became something else. A ghost. They tested her in silence, sending her into case scenarios that never made it into logs, shadow contracts, operations that brushed against the line of official acknowledgement without ever crossing it. One mission sent her to the Syrian border, embedded with a contractor unit under cartel-backed attack. She went in with nothing but a pack and a sidearm. She came out 5 days later leading 17 people, civilians and operators alike, alive. There was no press release, no medal, just another line typed into a classified folder. And by her 5th year, her name was erased from every official list. She was given a new one. Ghost 7. They weren't nicknamed ghosts. They were ghosts by function. Operators sent into places the world wasn't ready to acknowledge. Teams dispatched not when diplomacy failed, but when diplomacy never existed to begin with. Her unit was called Ghost Team Delta. 7 of them, no names, only call signs, no history, no legacy. Just shadows. She didn't resist. She didn't fight the anonymity, because in silence she found something cleaner than honor. She found purpose. But silence is never permanent. Operation Ember Lens wasn't meant to be a bloodbath. It was supposed to be surgical. A rogue CIA asset had gone dark near the Pakistan-Afghan border, selling classified arms to a hostile militia. Eden's team was tasked with intercepting the data, recovering it, and leaving before anyone knew they were there. Simple. Clean. But someone, somewhere, thousands of miles away in a clean suit, made a call. The point was changed. The map adjusted. What was once a corridor out became a kill box. They dropped straight into overlapping tribal crossfire. 3 were dead in the first 20 minutes. Shrapnel to the lungs, he never had a chance. Jacob cut down covering their east approach, eyes still sharp with disbelief when the rounds hit him. Aaron Cross. He dragged Eden out of a sniper's scope and took the bullet meant for her throat. And Eden was left with their silence. She killed 14 men in 47 minutes. No rifle, just a knife, a sidearm, and the raw ferocity of survival. When the finally came, she carried Aaron Cross's body for over a mile before they forced her to let him go. By the time she touched American soil again, there was still blood in her hair. The Navy offered her the Distinguished Service Cross. She refused. Medals are for graves, she said. The living carry the weight. 6 days later, her resignation was processed. The file was sealed. Her name was buried. Eden Wolf vanished. And the only proof she had ever existed were the 3 names tattooed beneath the skull and trident on her arm. Cross. Her silence wasn't born that day, but it deepened. She carried them with her, every morning, every breath. They haunted her not like ghosts who asked for vengeance, but like shadows who asked her not to forget. And she didn't. Not for 5 long years. Until the morning, a general spotted the ink no one else was meant to see. The ghosts had returned. And with them, the weight of unfinished reckonings. Because Eden Wolf's story wasn't about survival. It was about what you do after survival, when silence is all you have left. Why did no one ever sit beside her at chow? Why was the corner of the armory always hers alone, untouched, as though invisible boundaries had been drawn around her? Eden Wolf arrived at Fort each morning before reveille. She parked at the far edge of the lot, where the gravel gave way to weeds. She walked the long stretch to the armory with a toolbox in one hand and silence in the other. To most of the base, she was the woman who cleaned guns, nothing more. She never attended briefings. She never lingered in the mess. She was a civilian contractor, and that was all the explanation anyone needed or wanted. But Sergeant Rock wanted more. Tall, lean, voice like a barked joke, Rock was the kind of man soldiers both admired and endured. He had a grin that curled at one side, as if every sentence he spoke was the punchline to a joke only he understood. And Eden, quiet, detached, and seemingly out of place, became his favorite target. "Hey, Wolf," he called across the armory one morning, tossing a rag soaked in oil toward her bench. "Pretty sure you missed a spot on the latrine door yesterday. Want me to draw you a diagram?" The rag slid across her table. She didn't look up. Didn't even blink. She simply continued working the chamber of a battered M27, long, deliberate strokes with the cloth. Another soldier chuckled. "I heard she only got this gig through some veteran assistance program, like a charity slot. Maybe she married someone who actually served." Rock grinned wider. "Or maybe she thinks standing near guns makes her tough by osmosis." The laughter grew, but not from her. Eden said nothing. The bolt carrier snapped into place with a soft, clean click. She set the rifle down and reached for another. Silence can be heavy. It can hang like judgment, louder than words. And the more she ignored him, the louder Rock became. For weeks, the younger soldiers followed his lead, snickering, dropping careless remarks, watching to see if Eden would finally crack. She never did. But there was something about the way she moved. She never used manuals, never double-checked torque settings, never hesitated. Her hands worked like memory, like someone who had cleaned these weapons under darkness, under fire, under blood. And slowly doubt crept in. One operator brought her a sidearm with a malfunction. She handed it back 20 minutes later, running smoother than when it had left the factory. Another came quietly with a carbine that jammed after every third round. She returned it clean, efficient, flawless. The whispers shifted. Not respect, not yet. Something else. Wariness. Suspicion. Because whoever Eden Wolf was, she wasn't just some contractor. But Rock refused to let it go. The third week, he decided to escalate. He walked into the armory carrying an old SR-25, battered and warped like a weapon dragged through gravel. He dropped it hard on her bench. The clang echoed. "All right, everyone," he called out loud enough for the room to hear. "Let's have ourselves a little test." Soldiers leaned in, curious. "Contractor Wolf here thinks she knows her way around weapons. Let's see how she handles this." He smirked. "Call it continuing education." A ripple of laughter followed. Eden didn't move at first. She just stared at the rifle for a long moment. Then slowly, she set down the M27 she had been working on. Her fingers brushed the SR-25, reverent, cautious, as though she were touching something both sacred and dangerous. "Take your time, sweetheart," Rock said, folding his arms. "We know thinking isn't your strong suit." She didn't reply. She turned the rifle once. Her eyes scanned the upper receiver, the mag well, the scope mount. Then she set it down. Her voice was quiet, calm. "Gas tubes bent, 3 degrees off center. You used steel-cased rounds, probably 700 or more. Scored the port. Buffer spring been overcompressed. Mounts loose. Stress fractures here, here, and here." She tapped twice. "Your trigger group's full of dust. You left it chambered during a sandstorm or something equally stupid. And you've got heat expansion microcracks near the locking lugs." She pushed the rifle back gently. "This gun isn't just dirty," she said softly. "It's dying." The room froze. Rock blinked. She hadn't disassembled it, hadn't even cleared the chamber, and yet everything she said was true. The cracks, the scoring, the stress lines, all there, visible now that she had named them. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin, brittle. "Lucky guesses." Eden turned back to her cloth, resumed wiping the M27 as though nothing had happened. But the air in the room had shifted. The soldiers who used to laugh with Rock now stared at her differently. Not with mockery. With doubt. With unease. Because maybe this woman wasn't who they thought she was. Rock grew quieter after that. Not apologetic, never that, but sharper around the edges, like something in his skin had begun to itch whenever Eden was near. And so he set another trap. The armory EVAL was coming up. Senior Command wanted a live weapons inspection in front of the brass. Rock planted 3 faulty rifles among the racks, each booby-trapped with subtle errors that would embarrass anyone who dared call themselves an expert. Loose pins, mismatched buffers, a reverse trigger group. When the inspection began, Eden stepped into the bay. Half the barracks showed up to watch. She moved with the same calm precision. No theatrics, no hesitation, just eyes and fingers and silence. On the second rifle she paused. "Wrong locking lugs," she murmured. "This bolt carrier from a different lot. It'll fracture under repeated recoil." The inspector frowned, checked the paperwork, nodded quietly. By the third weapon, even the laughter had died. Soldiers leaned forward, holding their breath. Rock's jaw tightened. His trap was unraveling. But then it happened. As Eden leaned forward to inspect the last carbine, the heat in the room clung to her skin. Sweat traced the curve of her shoulder. Her jacket, tied loose around her waist, slipped just enough. The tattoo came into view. Not the partial glimpse from before. The full image. The skull, the trident, the anchor. And beneath it 3 names. Small, precise, burned into her flesh like scars. A corporal across the room froze, elbowed the man beside him. That soldier pulled out his phone, zoomed, snapped a picture. He didn't caption it. Didn't need to. Within minutes, the image spread across the base. Within 10, it reached a man who hadn't seen that ink in over a decade. General Keene. He was walking a corridor when he opened the secure tablet. He stopped mid-step, sat down where he stood. His knuckles whitened around the frame. It wasn't just the tattoo, it was the skin around it, the faint sheen of scar tissue, the precision of the ink, the stance of the shoulder it curved across. He had seen it before. In a field hospital, Kandahar. A ghost had dragged his team from an ambush that should have killed them all. And now that ghost had a name again. He tapped his earpiece. "Divert my route. I want eyes on Fort Armory discreetly, 20 minutes. "Sir." 20, clear the corridor. Back in the inspection bay, Eden set down the final carbine, unaware or perhaps fully aware of the storm that had already begun. She picked up her rag, wiped the sweat from her hand, reached for another weapon. Because she wasn't here to prove anything. Not to Rock. Not to anyone. But the ghosts never let you hide forever. And hers had just stepped back into daylight. Why would a 4-star general abandon protocol in the middle of a field inspection? What could possibly matter more than the brass, the ceremony, the ritual of rank and order? The sky over Fort was brutally clear that morning. A blue so sharp it made steel flash like mirrors, uniforms crisp under the glare. Soldiers stood in rank and file, boots aligned, rifles shouldered, the low hum of upcoming inspection thrumming through the air like static. Everyone knew brass was coming. But no one expected who stepped out of the armored SUV that rolled to a halt near the parade line. General Keene. 4 stars caught the sun on his shoulders. His posture, even after decades of war and politics, remained iron straight. His face unreadable, calm in the way storms look calm from a distance. He wore his dress greens today, because when ghosts rose from the dead, you wore your medals to meet them. He didn't shake hands, didn't greet the base commander, didn't step toward the podium. His eyes scanned the field until they found her. Eden Wolf. She wasn't in formation, she never was. She stood off to the side near the weapons staging area. Tank top, boots, jacket tied at her waist, ink visible on her arm, full and raw beneath the sun. The tattoo. The skull, the trident, the anchor. And 3 names. General Keane moved before anyone could stop him. He cut through the ranks of enlisted like wind through high grass. Soldiers shifted, confused, uncertain whether to follow or stand their ground. "Sir," the base colonel stammered, hurrying to catch up, "do you need a podium or—" Keane didn't answer. He didn't even look at him. He walked another 10 paces until he stood directly in front of Eden Wolf. She didn't flinch, didn't salute, didn't even blink. And then it happened. General Keane, 4 stars, combat tour, medals glittering on his chest, raised his right hand in a perfect salute. Not to a formation, not to a flag, to her, to Eden Wolf. The air shattered in silence. Dozens of soldiers froze mid-breath. No one moved, no one dared. Keane's eyes locked on hers. His salute wasn't duty, it wasn't command. It was debt. Recognition. The kind of salute given not to rank, but to ghosts who never got their parades. Eden blinked once. Her expression didn't change, but the entire base felt it. This wasn't in any manual. This wasn't regulation. This was something older, something heavier. Keane lowered his hand slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried across the field without a microphone, every word cutting through the silence. Chief Petty Officer Eden Wolf, Ghost 7, first of her kind, last of her team, sole survivor of Operation Ember Lens. The words detonated. Someone audibly gasped. A young SEAL candidate nearly dropped his rifle. A ripple surged through the ranks, disbelief and awe twisting in every pair of eyes. Keane didn't look at them. He looked only at her. "She's the reason I'm still breathing," he said firmly. His voice was steady, but beneath it was something: memory, pain, gratitude. "Her team saved mine in Kandahar. We were pinned. No backup, no way out. Then a ghost stepped out of the dust." He turned slightly, speaking now to everyone within earshot. "She neutralized 3 hostiles before my men could blink, dragged one of ours bleeding out from the chest, half a click through mortars. And then," he exhaled, "she disappeared before we could even thank her." Keane faced Eden again. "I've waited 15 years for the chance to salute her. Today, I finally got it." The silence was thick enough to choke on. Eden's eyes flicked downward. Slowly, she reached for the edge of her tank top, tugged the fabric higher over her shoulder. The tattoo caught the sun in full. SEAL Team 6, skull, trident, anchor. And beneath it 3 names. Jacob Aaron Cross. And under them, in thin etched lines, 2 words. Never forgotten. A rustle swept through the ranks. Not noise, not chatter. The kind of shift that happens when pride collapses into shame, when myth turns human and more powerful for it. Even Rock, standing rigid near the staging area, felt the weight slam into his chest. His jaw tightened as his eyes fixed on the names, one of them carved straight into his own history. Aaron Cross. Keane's voice softened. "She didn't ask to be honored, she never will, but that doesn't change what she is." He took 1 step back, heels together, posture sharp again. "For the record, Chief." He paused, his throat tightened. "Welcome home." Eden didn't answer. She didn't salute. Didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, silence was louder than 100 parades. The general's salute still hung in the air. Soldiers still frozen, unsure whether to clap, to bow their heads, to pretend they hadn't just witnessed history. Eden reached for her rag again, wiped the grease from her hand, turned back to the rifle on her bench. And the world kept turning. But nothing at Fort would ever be the same again. How does a man live with the weight of mocking someone who carried his family's last breath? Rock stood rigid behind the staging platform long after the ceremony had ended. Soldiers had dispersed, chatter returned, boots scuffed gravel again, but he didn't move. Eden Wolf packed her tools in silence. General Keene had vanished into the back of his armored SUV. The world resumed. But Rock's chest didn't. He couldn't breathe. Aaron Cross. That name was carved into his memory long before it was etched into Eden Wolf's skin. Aaron wasn't just some name whispered in SEAL stories. He wasn't just another casualty of an Op too secret to explain. Aaron was blood. The older cousin who had taught Rock to climb trees, tie knots, shoot straight. The one who shielded him when their father drank too much. The one who always said, "One day you'll serve too, but you better do it right." They had taken different paths into the Navy, but they had stayed close right up until Aaron's final deployment. Then the silence came. A folded flag, a closed casket, a letter that said nothing at all. For years, Rock carried that bitterness like lead in his bones. He cursed the nameless decisions that left Aaron dead, wondered who had failed him, wondered if someone had let him die. And now he saw Aaron's name carved beneath a trident on the arm of the woman he had mocked. It wasn't shame that clawed at him. It was grief. Because she had been there, she had held Aaron's last breath, and he had spent weeks trying to break her. He walked to the edge of the armory, leaned both hands against the concrete wall, and closed his eyes. The noise of the bass faded. He remembered the whispers. Ghost -7 they called her once. A figure in half-told stories, never explained, never confirmed. Now it had a face. Eden Wolf. The woman who carried his cousin's name on her skin. Rock didn't hear the footsteps approach until the shadow fell beside him. Leo. The man was older, quiet, unremarkable to most, until he was. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, arms folded, watching the gravel shift beneath their boots. "You feel it yet?" Leo finally asked. Rock didn't look up. Feel what? The truth when it lands. Rock swallowed hard. His throat burned. "I spent weeks treating her like a fraud, like a joke." Leo nodded slowly. "And she let you?" "Why?" Rock's voice cracked. "Because that's what ghosts do." Silence stretched between them, heavy, unforgiving. "She never once said Aaron's name," Rock whispered. "Not to me, not to anyone." Leo's voice softened. "She didn't have to." Rock's head turned sharply. "You knew." Leo unrolled his sleeve slowly, exposing the ink on his bicep. A trident, faded now with time, the same curve of anchor and dagger as Eden's. Only his bore an extra mark, a vertical slash through the skull, an Overwatch identifier. Rock froze. "I was Cross's swim buddy," Leo said quietly. "Bud S. Class 249. He wrote me before deployment, said if anything happened there was someone who'd take the weight." Leo's eyes shifted toward the armory, where Eden still sat alone at her bench, wiping a rifle clean in silence. "She didn't ask for backup," Leo continued, "but some ghosts don't walk alone." Eden didn't look up. She didn't acknowledge the words. Her hands kept moving, calm and deliberate, but they slowed for half a beat. Long enough to feel it. The weight of someone stepping forward. Rock stared at Leo, then back at her. "You were watching her." Leo nodded. "The whole time, because I knew one day someone wouldn't understand what she was carrying, and they might need to be reminded." Rock's jaw tightened. His throat ached with something unspoken. Around the room, no one laughed anymore. Even the soldiers who once snickered now sat in uneasy silence. Because when you see two ghosts standing in daylight, the only respectful thing to do is shut up and let them walk. Eden didn't speak. She didn't break her rhythm. But the air in the armory had changed forever. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was reverent, careful. Rock felt it settle in his bones. The realization that he had mocked not just a contractor, not just a woman, but a legacy. The woman who carried Aaron Cross's name. The woman his cousin had died for. The woman who bore the ghosts he could never see. And for the first time in years, Rock felt small. Not weak. Human. He exhaled slowly, the kind of breath you take when grief finally catches up with you. The kind of breath that says, "It's time to change." What words do you say to someone who held your family's last breath? And what if those words come years too late? That evening, long after drills had ended, and the base quieted to a low hum of generators and distant chatter, Rock found her. Eden Wolf sat alone behind the armory on a weathered wooden crate. The light was fading, soft amber stretching long shadows across concrete. Her sleeves were rolled up. In her hands, the bolt of a sniper rifle turned slowly, careful strokes of the cloth catching the dying light. There was no ceremony in the way she worked, no performance, just ritual. Rock stood there for a long time, unsure if he had the right to speak. The wind shifted, brushing dust between them, as though the silence itself was testing his resolve. Finally, his voice broke it. "I didn't know." She didn't look up. The cloth kept moving. "I didn't know it was you," he said again, softer now. "I didn't know you were with him." His throat tightened. "That you were the one who carried him." Eden paused, just for a second, then resumed cleaning. Rock swallowed hard. His chest ached. "For years I thought someone screwed up, thought maybe someone let him die, and all that time," he shook his head, "you were the one who came back." That made her look up, her eyes calm, unreadable. Rock's voice cracked. "I found out he died saving you." Her gaze didn't flinch, didn't soften. But she stood slowly, the sunset catching the ink on her arm. The names glowed faint in amber light. Cross. Her voice was quiet, steady. "He didn't save me." Rock's breath caught. "He made sure the mission ended the way it had to." The words struck deeper than any accusation. Not guilt, not justification, just truth. Rock shook his head slowly. "He would followed you into hell." Eden's eyes flickered with something unspoken. "He did." They stood there in silence, two shadows framed by the fading sun, the air between them thick with loss. Rock's hands clenched. "I don't deserve to ask this," he said finally. His voice was raw, stripped of all the bravado he once wore like armor. "But if you're going to train anyone here, I want in." Eden studied him, not as the loud sergeant who mocked her, not as the man who had tried to humiliate her, but as the boy who once looked up to Aaron Cross. Her expression didn't change, but her silence stretched like judgment. "You'll have to start over," she said at last. Rock nodded, quickly, desperately. "No ego," she added. He nodded again. "No shortcuts." His voice cracked. "I understand." Eden looked down at the sniper bolt in her hand. Then, slowly, she extended it toward him. Rock froze. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was something harder. Responsibility. He reached out carefully, almost reverently, and took it from her. His fingers brushed hers for the briefest second, callous skin meeting callous skin. "You'll help build them," she said, "before you try to lead them." Her words landed like orders carved into stone. Rock held the unfinished bolt in both hands, as though it weighed more than steel. Eden Wolf turned back to her kit, sat down again, and resumed her work. The conversation was over. But something in Rock's chest shifted. For the first time in years, the bitterness loosened. Not gone, not healed, but changed. He didn't have answers, he didn't have closure. But he had a direction. And for a man who had lived too long in the shadow of silence, that was enough. When does a base change? Is it when new orders come down from command? Or is it when one silent figure shifts the rhythm of everything around her? The shape of fort didn't change. Buildings still stood where they always had. Drills still rang out every morning. Boots still struck gravel in perfect timing. But something in the atmosphere was different. It began in the dark, before sunrise. At 4:30 sharp, Eden Wolf unlocked the weapons bay. She laid out stripped-down rifles across 3 benches, bolts and barrels glinting under fluorescent light. No announcements, no orders, no roster. And slowly they came. At first it was just Leo. He moved like a shadow, sleeves rolled, quiet as always. He never explained why he was there. He didn't need to. Then Rock. He came the second morning, standing awkwardly near the door until Eden motioned once, a silent invitation. He stepped forward, laid his hands on the cold steel of a carbine and began to work. By the third morning, whispers had spread. A couple of recruits drifted in, curious. They didn't know what to expect. They thought maybe it was extra drill, a chance to impress. But Eden didn't teach like the others. She didn't shout, didn't punish sloppiness with barked orders, didn't measure worth by sweat spilled on the floor. She just moved, quiet, precise, correcting once, maybe twice, and somehow that correction cut deeper than any lecture. A grip adjusted, a sight realigned, a trigger squeeze slowed until it was clean, controlled. It wasn't about strength. It was about restraint, about memory, about discipline born from loss. The recruits felt it without fully understanding. And so they returned. By the second week, Ghost Hour had a rhythm. Eden led in silence, Leo hovered like a steady presence, and Rock changed now, quieter, sharper, absorbed everything. He treated every bolt assembly like scripture, every cleaning stroke like a vow. He no longer smirked, no longer barked, he simply worked. One morning, Eden handed him her own rifle for cleaning. She never said she trusted him. She didn't need to. Rock understood. By the end of the month, Eden let him run the warm-ups, calling cadence softly, correcting a recruit's stance, showing them how to feel the click in the trigger group before the break. No fanfare, no recognition, just trust quietly placed in his hands. And then came the 10th Friday. The sun had barely cleared the tree line when a lone figure appeared at the edge of the training field. No driver, no entourage, just him. General Keene. He stood there for almost an hour, watching without a word. He watched Eden correct a grip with a single touch, watched Leo realign a scope, watched Rock, the loud sergeant who once mocked, now teaching younger recruits how to listen to the silence between their breaths. When the session ended, Keene approached. "You rebuilt them," he said. Eden nodded once. They rebuilt themselves. Keene studied her for a long time. His voice softened. "Come back." Her eyes didn't blink. "Not to the roster," he clarified, "to the mission." She looked at him, steady, unflinching. "I never left." The words hung in the air like a verdict. And for the first time in years, Keene smiled. Not the smile of a general, not the smile of command, but the weary smile of a man who understood what it meant to owe your life to ghosts. Ghost Hour continued. And though Eden still spoke little, her silence began to sound like something more. Not absence. Legacy. Why do some departures feel louder than arrivals? Why is silence heavier than any farewell? One morning, Ghost Hour began differently. At 4:30, Rock arrived to unlock the armory, but the doors were already open. The benches were laid out, the rifles stripped, the tools aligned with surgical precision. But Eden wasn't there. Nor was her rifle. He said nothing, just stood still in the quiet. At 4:45, Leo arrived. He paused at the doorway, scanning the benches the way a man scans terrain. He saw the absence too. Neither spoke. By the third day, whispers spread through the barracks. "She's gone." Command pulled her back. Black Ops reassignment. Maybe she was never really here. But the fourth morning, there was something new. On Eden's bench lay a small olive-green duffel, folded neatly under a canvas cover. Rock was the first to see it. He stared for a long time before touching it. Inside were her tools, a bolt carrier she had rebuilt 17 times, a sidearm no longer regulation, clean to perfection. And at the bottom, a single photo. 7 figures in dusty uniforms. No names, no smiles, just shadows. One woman in the center, slightly turned away, almost unrecognizable, but unmistakably her. Taped flat behind the photo was a coin, an Overwatch identifier. Leo lifted it gently, holding it like a relic. "She's not coming back," he said quietly. Rock didn't answer. His hands clenched the duffel strap, chest locked tight. Not grief. Not abandonment. Something else. Legacy. She hadn't left them empty. She had just stopped standing in the light. The weeks passed. The sun still rose with military precision. Reveille still sounded. Formation still stood. But there was a new rhythm now. It came from the bench. The one Eden Wolf used to sit at. The one she left behind. At 4:30, Rock unlocked the armory, laid out the weapons, opened the benches. Sometimes Leo joined him, sometimes a handful of recruits. Some mornings it was a full class, others just silence. But the method remained. No shouting, no rank. Just steel, breath, focus. Respect not given but earned. They called it Ghost Hour. At first, recruits thought it was an unofficial drill, a way to impress command, but those who stayed long enough realized it wasn't about performance. It was about memory, about discipline, about carrying weight you never asked for. One afternoon, a new group of trainees arrived. Among them was a young female corporal, sharp-eyed, far too young to be in a SEAL candidate program. After the formal tour, she lingered near the armory, watching Ghost Hour from a distance. When Rock asked why, she pointed to the Overwatch coin nailed into the bench. "My brother had one of those," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "Said it belonged to someone who saved his whole unit once." Rock nodded slowly. "Then you're already in the right place." That night, under the fading light of a quiet sky, Rock walked to the edge of the compound. There was a stone wall where old patches and name tags were sometimes pinned as tribute. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Eden's name tag. He placed it against the wall, fixing it in place with a single bolt she used to carry in her gear bag. No plaque, no ceremony. Just 2 words written below with black marker. Still watching. Because Eden Wolf hadn't vanished. She had become something else. A presence in the way rifles were handled with reverence. A memory in the hands that learned to fix, not just fire. A silence that spoke louder than orders. And for every recruit who passed through Fort, there was one rule during Ghost Hour. No shortcuts. No questions. Never dishonor the bench. Her name would never be carved in marble. There would be no folded flag, no national headline. Just a bench, a bolt, and a generation shaped quietly from the shadows. Because Eden Wolf never asked to be remembered. She simply made sure no one else was forgotten. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.